Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. One decision, one word, and suddenly an empire crumbles. For Caitlin Clark, revenge wasn't about firing shots on social media or snapping back in interviews. Her revenge was devastatingly simple. She said, "No to Geno Auriemma, no to UConn's legacy." No to the $1 million offer that came crawling back to her years later. On paper, it looked absurd. Who turns down over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? But this wasn't just a contract. It was a lifeline for a man who once dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an afterthought. When Clark rejected it, she didn't just pass on a paycheck. She humbled the man who never thought he could be humbled. Every revenge story starts with a mistake. Geno's wasn't a blown play or a bad timeout. It was arrogance. Pure blinding arrogance. Before Caitlin Clark became the face of the sport, before the sold-out arenas and record-shattering TV ratings, she was just a kid with a dream. And that dream looked a lot like UConn. For a girl growing up in Iowa, UConn was the mountaintop. It was Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. It was the empire of women's basketball. Recruitment time came. The script seemed obvious. The most electrifying talent of her generation, paired with the greatest recruiter the women's game had ever seen. But the call never came. Geno never picked up the phone, never called her parents, barely even sent a message through her AAU coach. For the self-proclaimed king of recruiting, the silence was deafening. And it wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. UConn had Paige Buchers. Geno didn't want two-point guards. His message was clear. She wasn't a priority. Then came the insult. Geno suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that. The man who built his dynasty on spotting once-in-a-generation talent years before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. It was disrespect. The kind you never forget. So Clark filed it away. If Geno didn't believe in her, she'd go somewhere that did. Iowa wasn't the glamour choice. No dynasty banners, no aura of invincibility. But what looked like a consolation prize became liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Geno's afterthought. She was the recruit. The program would live and die with her. And from the second she stepped onto the court in Iowa City, she rewrote the script. Her logo threes weren't just shots. They were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds. They were proof. Her record-shattering TV ratings weren't flukes. They were receipts. Every basket, every highlight, every broken record whispered the same message. You missed this. And Geno, instead of humility, he doubled down. He brushed her off with condescending sound bites, calling her a kid playing in the driveway. He tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't drag the WNBA into mainstream relevance. Ordinary doesn't cost you millions. Geno had closed the door when Clark knocked, thinking she'd fade into another good player. Instead, she built the biggest empire women's basketball had ever seen without him. And when he finally circled back, contract in hand, Clark didn't rage. She didn't gloat. She simply said no. And that one word cost him more than any championship loss ever could, but Geno couldn't let it go. Anytime Clark's name came up, he tethered her to Paige Buchers. If Caitlin was fearless, well, Paige was too. If Caitlin was connecting with fans, so had Paige. It wasn't random, it was strategy. He wanted the world to believe her success was nothing new, nothing separate from the dynasty he had built. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Other coaches noticed. Clark's brilliance didn't need qualifiers. She was drawing bigger crowds than most professional franchises, breaking records no one had touched, rewriting the conversation around women's basketball. Yet there was Geno, smiling for the cameras while clinging to his throne. Eventually, the mask slipped. For months, he relied on sly digs disguised as commentary. Then in June 2024, during an interview on The Dan Patrick Show, he crossed a line he could never walk back. He didn't just question Caitlin Clark, he went after her fans. The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. He sneered. There were actually odds where she was third or fourth in MVP voting. These people are so disrespectful and so stupid it gives women's basketball a bad name. It was stunning. Millions of new eyes had just flooded into women's basketball because of Clark. Families were showing up in jerseys. Kids were camping out for autographs. Casual fans were tuning into the WNBA for the first time ever. And Geno's response wasn't gratitude. It wasn't celebration. It was insult. This wasn't analysis. It was personal. He wasn't just dismissing Clark. He was dismissing the lifeblood of her movement, the fans. And because he's Geno Auriemma, people listened. His words carried weight, which made them all the more damaging. But Clark didn't clap back. She didn't need to. Her response came on the court. She won Rookie of the Year. She made all WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes came in, she finished exactly 4th, right where those delusional fans had predicted. The very prediction Geno mocked became reality. His authority crumbled. His insult aged like milk in the sun, silent revenge. No rants, no clapbacks, just results. Every logo 3, every crossover, every sold-out arena was a reminder. He was wrong. She was right. Her fans were right, and yet Geno still couldn't let go. Being wrong wasn't something he could stomach. So he pivoted. If he couldn't control the narrative with his words, maybe he could do it with money. Enter Unrivaled, a new 3-on-3 women's league backed by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno lurking behind the curtain as an investor. The project had ambition. It had funding. But it lacked the one thing that mattered most: a face. There was only one player who could give the league instant legitimacy. One player who could drag in millions of fans, sponsors, and media partners. That player was Caitlin Clark. And so Geno came knocking. Reports confirmed the league offered Clark over $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the richest contracts ever dangled in women's basketball. The same man who wouldn't pick up the phone when she was 17 was now practically begging her to save his new league. The same man who called her fans delusional now needed them to buy his tickets and stream his games. The irony was delicious. For Clark, the decision wasn't hard. When the contract slid across her desk, she didn't see opportunity. She saw desperation. She saw a test. The man who dismissed her, undermined her, insulted her supporters, was now trying to monetize her success. And her response was swift. No explanations. No hesitation. Just no.